Hello, Dr. James Bogash, expert in health longevity, and today we're going to talk about sunlight exposure and the fears we've really had built into us, and how in today's society we can kind of mitigate some of that damage from sun exposure. Because two things are very clear: that we were designed to get heavy sunlight exposure. Um, now, granted, my Irish ancestors weren't hanging out at the equator, but we were designed to be outside all the time, no sunscreen, all of this stuff, and vitamin D plays a huge role in certain aspects of our health, both immune function, bone density, cancer prevention. So we were supposed to get most of our vitamin D from sunlight exposure. That's not to say that sunlight isn't damaging, because it certainly can. I certainly wouldn't suggest you should run outside at noon in the summer and slather on baby oil with iodine and, just wait till you can smell flesh burning. But sun exposure, I always call it rational sun exposure. And we can talk about like minimal erythemic doses, but for me, if I'm going to be out in the sun for half hour, I generally won't wear sunscreen. If I'm going to be out in the sun for that long, I'm looking for barrier protection. So long sleeve shirt, always a hat because I don't really have any natural sunscreen. I don't typically use sunscreen very often unless it's really necessary, or certainly on the face. But for me, if I'm going to be out in the sun long enough, it's barrier protection. So the people do get melanoma is a different discussion, because that's not, melanoma is a major killer, mainly because it has a high tendency to metastasize. Keep in mind that a lot of melanomas don't occur on sun exposed areas of the body, so there's way more to the story than just vitamin D exposure, or than just sunlight exposure. And however, basal cell and squamous cell carcinoma do appear on sun-exposed areas, on the face, on the arms, the back, and so you can kind of look at that as an indicator that somebody's been exposed to too much sunlight. We should never get burned, especially as a child, certainly at any age, but as a child, those things do lead to problems down the line. So this study, and now this was out of Tasmania, which is Tasmanian devil, off of the southeast coast of Australia, so a heavy sun-exposed area. But they looked at almost 1,100 people, and they looked between the ages of 50 and 80 years of age. And of this group, 165 of them had non-melanoma skin cancer. So generally, basal cell and squamous cell are in the highest part of that list. And what they found is the people that were diagnosed with non-melanoma skin cancer had a 26% lower risk of suffering a vertebral fracture, like a compression fracture of the spine. They had better bone, the cortical versus the medullary structure, like their bones were healthier, and they had better vitamin D levels, that's obvious. But here's something to consider. The bone isn't just about fracture. Bone plays an integral role in things like avoiding diabetes. Too complicated to get into the pathway here, but like you want your bones to be healthy, because they're going to lead to healthier overall health. So what do we kind of do with this? Like, can we get sun exposure, rational sun exposure, and are there things that we can do to protect against that? Well, there's a pretty long list of things that affect your risk of non-melanoma skin cancer. So if we can avoid these and get rational, or avoid or add these and get rational sun exposure, we might be able to get the benefits of that vitamin D, also nitric oxide, melatonin production. There's a lot of other things that happen with sunlight, because again, we're supposed to be getting sun exposure. So top of the list of things that absolutely increase your risk is alcohol and smoking. Those two, any type of epithelial cancer, so think anything that lines the GI tract, but the skin, those things will absolutely increase your risk. So if you do those, especially in combination, you need to stop for obvious reasons. Healthier fats will lower your risk of skin cancer. Number 3, a Mediterranean diet, which also includes some of the healthier fats, have been shown to lower the risk of non-melanoma skin cancer. Fruit pretty drastically lowers your risk of non-melanoma skin cancer. I tend to steer people towards berries, but fruit has been shown to. Low-fat dairy also has a pretty strong protection against non-melanoma skin cancer for whatever reason. Vitamin A. So typically we can get vitamin A, preformed vitamin A is beta-carotene in our foods, but supplement-wise, we can get it from, generally I'll recommend patients take vitamin A along with vitamin D and K. Well balanced, those D and A fight for the same receptors, so we need balance between those. And polyphenols, so all these plant-based compounds have been shown to really protect the skin from UV damage. And if you get damage, let's say you spend too much time out in the sun, those polyphenols, more of having them in their diet will actually protect your skin from the damage, the DNA damage that happens from the sun exposure. So bottom line is that we're supposed to be out in the sun, and this idea of slathering on SPF 90 just to walk to the car there's a pretty good argument that it's creating more harm than it is benefit. You can get rational sun exposure, but you need to balance that out with a lifestyle that's going to lower your risk of non-melanoma skin cancer in multiple different approaches. So, about balance. So, as always, I will post a link to this particular study in the description. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.